Hello. Sir. Hello, sir.
मैं वेट कीजिए 5 मिनट्स।
Okay.
रोल नंबर 24। रोल नंबर 24। 24। रोल नंबर 24, please start the read the biota. 24, please start.
Yes, I am audible.
Yes.
Good morning, all faculty. Director HRDC, team HRDC, who is actively participating in this faculty program. It's my honor to introduce to you Dr. Purushottam Vishnu Deshmukh, who is a distinguished researcher with over a decades of experience in economics. He is currently serve as a professor and head Department of Economics, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Marathwada University, Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar, and also as a director, Shankar Maharishi, Balasaheb Pawar Study Center, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Marathwada University. He did his BA from Koleshwar Mahavidyalaya, Ambezogai, and MA Economics with University Merit 1 rank from Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Marathwada University. He also did B.Ed with distinction from Government Education College. He also qualified the SAT exam with Mathematical Economics. He did PhD in Economics from the same university, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Marathwada University. Beyond his professional achievement, Dr. Purushottam sir is known for his many awards. One of them is the State one of State Ratnalal Kabra Purushottik MA University Rank Award, Sri Maharao Ramchandra Bodankar Award. He also awarded as an Best NSS Program Officer at university as well as state level. He also attended various refresher orientation courses as well short-term courses on disaster management in his tenure. He has been published more than 20 research papers in various reputed international as well as national journals. He also published more than 9 research articles in various conference proceedings. He also presented paper in various national as well as international conferences and seminars. He's also actively taken part in various conferences, workshops, seminar. More than 12 published articles published in edited book and one book published under the name of 1981 पासूनच्या भारतीयच्या व्याजदरांचे पातळीवर विश्लेषण. Under his guidance, more than 20 PhD students is awarded. More than 35 students completed MPhil degree and 2 are currently working. He worked on project under the title Shendra Audik Wasahat प्रकल्पग्रस्त शेतकऱ्यांच्या सामाजिक आर्थिक अभ्यास, the study of the environmental problem in Parali Vaijinath city, socio-economic study of industrial labor in Waluj MIDC. He successfully handled various institutional responsibility like deputy criteria coordinator, department IQC coordinator, director, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Study Center. He is also associated with various institutional responsibilities, like where he worked as a BOS in various universities, like RR's research advisory committee member and all that thing. He is a life member in Indian Economic Association, life member of Indian Society of Agricultural Economics. His research on economics not only advanced in field of economics, but also the practical implication, making his insightable valuable to our discussion. Please join me for welcoming Dr. Purushottam Deshmukh, sir. We are eagerly anticipate his lecture on economics. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for my introduction. Welcome to all participants. Good morning to all, one and all. I'm going to deal with the a very interesting topic. My presentation will be related to the basically for the social sciences, because the research in social sciences has more need to validate with some basic or scientific techniques. Therefore, I will focus what is the role of the testing of hypothesis in the research. There is some basic difference between the research of the social science and the pure sciences. The research in social sciences has some problem regarding the authenticity. Therefore, it is need to validate some research, some results and some research methodology with the help of mathematics and the statistics tools. The mathematical and statistical tool have played the pivotal role in the research of social sciences as well as the pure sciences. Our utility of the research will depend upon the authenticity of our research. Therefore, it is need to validate your conclusion, validate your methodology with some basic statistical tools. In this lecture, I will try to focus the role of testing of hypothesis in research. If we try to find out the research in social sciences, generally we can find there are some mistakes regarding the hypothesis and the assumption. Most of researchers involves the word hypothesis with the sense of assumptions, but there is some basic difference between the hypothesis and the assumptions. Therefore, it is necessary to identify some basic difference between the hypothesis and the assumption. We can define the hypothesis, the assumption. A assumption is tested implicitly, or the assumption is conclusion of the previous experiment. The assumption is already tested by someone researcher, or the assumption is a statement that is taken for granted. This is the meaning of the assumption. But If we think about the hypothesis, hypothesis has deeper sense compared to the assumption, because the hypothesis is a testable statement about relationship between two or more variables. If we study the relationship between two or more variables, or if we have an interest to study the behavior of the any variable, then you can predicate the conclusion, our conclusion, and that conclusion we can say that the hypothesis. Therefore, hypothesis is the probable conclusion, and the hypothesis may be wrong or may be true. That's upon your quality of the research, or that depends on the data or the methodology which is implied in your research. Generally, the assumptions is explicit or implicit, but the hypothesis should be only explicit. This is the main difference between the assumptions and hypothesis. The assumptions for your research not testable, but the hypothesis is a statement which is testable for your research. This is the main difference between the hypothesis and the assumption. What is the meaning of the, if we go to the meaning of the hypothesis, I have more interest to explain the various dimensions of the hypothesis and the what is the methodology which is applicable for the social sciences as well as the some pure sciences. The meaning of this hypothesis we can define at the preliminary level. The hypothesis is a possible and probable explanation of the sequence of the happening or data. This is the probable or possible explanation regarding your research. That research will be research will be related to your PhD thesis, or research will be related to your research article. This sometimes hypothesis may emerge from an imagination, common sense, or a sudden event. This is the idea behind this. The hypothesis is your imagination, or it is a prediction of your which is depend upon your previous study. Hypothesis can be probable answer to research problem undertaken for study. And this is the more important. Hypothesis may not always be true. It can be disproven or inverse. In other words, hypothesis need not always be a true proposition. Hypothesis may be true or may be wrong. We don't worry regarding the hypothesis is wrong or is true. Hypothesis is not an individual opinion or community thought. Instead, it is a philosophical means which is to be used for research purpose. The main purpose of the hypothesis is your research. Therefore, hypothesis not be considered as a ultimate objective. This is not ultimate objective. This is a mean to fulfill your research. This is the main the meaning of the research, the hypothesis. Some author already explained some definitions of the hypothesis. Max Black. Hypothesis is a proposition not known to be definitely true or false, examined for the sake of determination of the consequences which would follow from its true. The Good and Hat mentioned that hypothesis is a proposition which can be put to the test to determine validity and is useful for further research. This is the main feature of the hypothesis. Hypothesis is a mean to continue your research, or hypothesis is a roadmap of your research. Because if we define the hypothesis, then you will divert your research with the hypothesis or root of the hypothesis. Therefore, it is the useful tool for the researcher. The HR Smart defined that a hypothesis is a guess or supposition as to extents of some fact or law which will serve to explain a concentration of facts already known to exist. And the another definition which is mentioned in the International Dictionary, Webster's New International Dictionary in English language, a hypothesis is a proposition, condition, or principle which is assumed, perhaps without belief, in order to draw its logical consequences, and by this method to test its occurred with facts which are known or may be determined. These are some definitions which are already explained by some authors. Next, the main part of the hypothesis or the procedure is important regarding the testing of hypothesis. And the procedure is involves some steps. There are various steps. There are various types of the explanations are available in various books of the statistics as well as the research methodology. But generally, we can see there are 7 steps involving the hypothesis testing. Researchers should be apply of these steps. First step is state the hypothesis. Initially, I would like to explain. In social sciences, there are 2 types of the researcher and research. One research is with hypothesis and another research will be without hypothesis. In the history, most of researchers research have to without hypothesis, but some social sciences or subject in social sciences need to put the hypothesis. Therefore, there are 2 types of the hypothesis research in social sciences. First is with hypothesis and without hypothesis. My explanation is regarding the research with hypothesis. Therefore, the procedure of the hypothesis testing involves the 7 steps. First step is state the hypothesis. First step. There are 2 types of the hypothesis should be mentioned by the researcher. I will explain the various types of the hypothesis, but for testing of hypothesis, we have to set up 2 hypotheses. We have to mention 2 types of the hypothesis. One is null hypothesis and another is alternative hypothesis. The null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis indicates the different meanings of regarding your research. The null hypothesis is opposite of the alternative hypothesis, or we can say that alternative hypothesis is opposite or with reverse with the null hypothesis. Null hypothesis indicates that there is no relationship, there is no significant relationship between the variables, or the variable is not significant statistically. This is the indication of the null hypothesis. And the other side, there is one hypothesis exists and the another hypothesis is known as the alternative hypothesis. Alternative hypothesis indicates that the inverse meaning of the null hypothesis, that is the alternative hypothesis indicates some variable is important statistically, or there is some relationship between the given selected variables have the important relation or is significant. Such type of the 2 types of the hypothesis should be set up by the researcher. The next type, after the formation of the hypothesis, you have to decide the test the decision regarding the test application. There are various types of the statistics, and there are various types of the tests are available. We can classify the tests with main 2 types, that is the parametric test and non-parametric tests. There are various kinds of the parametric tests are available, such that the t-test, z-test, f-test, chi-square test. There are various types of the tests are available, and there are various uses of the tests in social sciences, and the second types of the test is known as the non-parametric test. Specify the significance level. After the selection of the your identify the appropriate the test statistics and the probability distribution, you have to specify the significance level. The significance level is important regarding your research, because according to significance level, we can determine the validity or the authenticity of your research. The significance level may be 1%, 5%, 10%. There are various types of the levels are available. As per the researcher or the research, you can select any type of the significance level, but generally we have to select the 5% significant level for your research. Then state the decision rule. You can apply the various tests for your according to your problem or according to your objective of your research. There are various types of decision rules are available. You can select one rule as per your objective of the research or the data which is collected in your research. Then collect the data and calculate the test statistics. This is very important exercise in your research. After the set up the null hypothesis and set alternate hypothesis, you have to collect and you have to formulate the data which is applicable to the statistics tests, because we have to calculate some basic test formulas. According to test formulas, we have to conclude. Therefore, it is necessary to collect the data and the calculate your tests. Then they make the statistical decisions. There is, as per the tests, there are various methods are available to calculate the tests and the test value. And the last step is to make an economic decision. You have to conclude regarding your hypothesis true or hypothesis rejected or hypothesis is accepted. There is some basic or there is a specific methodology available for the decision. In the last step, you have to decide the null hypothesis rejected or null hypothesis accepted. It is important. Researchers must be always test the null hypothesis, and according to rejection or acceptance, you can conclude regarding your research with the null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. These are the steps involved in the testing of hypothesis. These all tests are necessary for your testing of hypothesis. This is the very important point. This is the very important dimensions. In research, the problem is important how to define or how to set up the null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. In social sciences as well as the pure sciences, there are various sources are available for the setting up hypothesis. The first source is very general source, the previous knowledge or previous studies. Every researcher has some basic knowledge regarding his study or regarding his research topic or regarding his research article. Previous knowledge and information regarding the topic of the hypothesis will be extremely helpful to create a concrete hypothesis. With your previous knowledge, you can make the probable statement, you can make the probable conclusion regarding your research or research topic, because researcher has need to some previous knowledge for his further research. Therefore, it is basic condition, it is necessary condition. You have to some basic knowledge regarding your research, and that previous knowledge will create the hypothesis. The nature of the hypothesis will depend upon your previous knowledge regarding your or previous study regarding the your research topic. Then you can create the research hypothesis with your personal experience. If one has personal experience regarding the topic investigation, he or she can use the information hypothesis to make it more complete and good quality. Any theory or concept will be born with the personal experience, and personal experience has play or have played the more pivotal role in your research. Therefore, the researcher has some personal experience, and the researcher has developed, create the hypothesis, that is null hypothesis and alternate hypothesis, with his or her personal experience. And with the personal experience, we can predicate, we can set up the probable or possible conclusion regarding your thesis or regarding your research with the help of personal experience. Therefore, personal experience is more important with your research or research article. You have to earn personal experience regarding your research topic. Next thing, thinking and imagination. This is the main thing. Thinking is very important because it is an indication. It is an indicator. Thinking is an indicator of the human. We can say that the human is a thinker animal. Therefore, thinking and imagination have to play the important role in your creating of hypothesis. Imagination is very important because the hypothesis is the probable conclusion, or it will be tested by in your research with some basic statistical method. Therefore, imagination is very important, and a researcher's personal ideas and thinking abilities would result in a greater number of hypotheses formulation as well as control over the problem. The nature of the hypothesis will be defined, will be designed with the help of your thinking and what type of the imagination you have. The imagination is very important. In social sciences, there is more scope to imagination. In pure sciences, there is some methodology. In pure sciences, there is basic setup to identify, to develop, to search. But in social sciences, there are various dimensions of the research. Therefore, researcher has good idea, and his imagination power is more powerful. Therefore, the thinking and imagination tool will help to create your hypothesis. And the fourth is scientific theory. It would be extremely helpful to use scientific theories in hypothesis because it is capable for explaining all the facts related to the investigation. The present or the exist scientific theories are available, and you can design your hypothesis with the ground of the scientific theory. Your hypothesis will not be very misleading. Therefore, you have to some idea regarding the exist theory of the scientific theory. Therefore, the scientific theory will create the hypothesis, and the nature of hypothesis will be defined with the help of the scientific theory. Next, the types of the hypothesis. This is the more important point because as per your research, we can classify the various types of the hypothesis. There are various types of the hypothesis are available. You can classify or you can build up your hypothesis with some sub criteria. Therefore, the formulation of the hypothesis we can explain with this various method, with these various types. Therefore, the first is simple hypothesis. The simple hypothesis indicates that there is only it speaks that the relationship between two or more two variables, one which is known as independent and other is dependent. That is the cause and effect. Such type of the simple hypothesis indicates that the relationship between two variables, one variable is dependent and another variable is independent. Or another word, we can say that if we have to interest to study the relationship between the cause and effect, you have to develop, you have to build up the simple hypothesis. Therefore, it is also known as the basic hypothesis. Researcher can build up such type of the simple hypothesis if he has interest to study the cause and effect. Therefore, he will set up such type of the hypothesis. The second hypothesis is complex hypothesis. A complex hypothesis is one that has multiple dependent and independent variables. If we have to interest to study what is the effect of the inflation in the various dimensions of the society. There are various types, there are various effects of the inflation in the society. If we have defined hypothesis with the idea behind the inflation, the causes and effects of the inflation, you have to build up the complex hypothesis. Or if you have to interest to study of the foreign culture in Indian society, you have to define the complex hypothesis, and you have to build up, or you have to carry on your research with this complex hypothesis. The next null hypothesis. The null hypothesis always indicates that there is no important relation, or there is no significant relationship between two or more variables, or there is the empirical hypothesis, because it asserts that there is no relationship between the dependent and independent variable. It basically says that the data and variable being tested do not exist. The null hypothesis itself indicates that there is no important, that may be variable, or that may be relationship between two or more variables. The null hypothesis in researchers always indicates that, or always define the null hypothesis and another hypothesis, alternative hypothesis. The alternative hypothesis, it is also referred as to sustained hypothesis or research hypothesis, and it is more important hypothesis. Researcher has to build up the alternative hypothesis with null hypothesis. Alternative hypotheses are further classified into the four main types, because if we test the null hypothesis, the rejection or acceptance of the null hypothesis, you will conclude with the alternative hypothesis. Therefore, alternative hypothesis is important, is essential with the null hypothesis. And the alternative hypothesis we can classify with the four types. That is the point alternative hypothesis, the non-directional alternative hypothesis, one-tailed directional hypothesis, and two-tailed directional hypothesis. I will explain the one-tailed and two-tailed hypothesis or testing methods in further slide. But alternative hypothesis we can classify into four types. There are various types are available for classification of the alternative hypothesis that depend upon your nature of your research and your thesis. Then the fifth hypothesis is logical hypothesis. It is logically verified, as the name implies. The verification process entails the following steps. Such type of the hypothesis you can involve in the qualitative research. Agreement, disagreement, different points of the view. If we study, or if you see the questionnaire, in the questionnaire there are some questions. yes or no types, or agree or disagree type. In such a type of the questionnaire, you can apply the logical hypothesis, and the logical hypothesis has more important step, that is agreement, the agreement, disagreement, and different points of the view. Such type of the logical hypothesis is essential for the qualitative research. There are qualitative research are carried out in the social sciences, and if you have interest to carry out your research with qualitative dimension, then you have to set up the logical hypothesis. Further hypothesis is empirical hypothesis, and it is known as also working hypothesis. During the formulation phase, it is only one assumption, but once tested, it is no longer just an idea or notion. It is actually changing in relation to those independent variables. This is the working hypothesis, and such type of the hypothesis will be changed with nature while your research. Empirical hypothesis also plays the pivotal role in the researcher or research topic. And the statistical hypothesis, the statement could be logical or illogical, but the statistical evidence validates it, becomes a statistical hypothesis. The statistical hypothesis you will use mainly in the quantitative research. Such type of the classification depend upon what type of your research, or the hypothesis which is applicable is depend upon the nature of your research. Your research is qualitative research or your research is quantitative research. Qualitative research or quantitative research will be applicable for these such type of the types of the hypothesis. Researcher can select or can build up the any type of the hypothesis in his or her research as per the nature of the research, that is the qualitative or quantitative research. This is the types of the hypothesis. These some examples of the hypothesis, simple hypothesis. I would like to explain the some examples regarding the hypothesis, various types of the hypothesis. Simple hypothesis: icebergs melt as a result of global warming. This is the simple hypothesis, example of simple hypothesis. Here we can easily observe that the cause and effect relationship between the cause in this case global warming, and the effects is melting icebergs. In such type of the your research, you can use the simple hypothesis. In simple hypothesis, we can establish the relationship between only two variables. Therefore, it is known as the simple hypothesis. And the researcher can be used in the cause and effect research of the simple hypothesis. The further example of the complex hypothesis: global warming causes icebergs to melt, which leads to significant change in weather patterns. In this example, if we involved more dimensions or more effects of the icebergs or more causes of the icebergs or global warming, then your hypothesis will be leads to the complex hypothesis. In this case, the cause in this case global warming, but the effect is melting iceberg along with changing weather. In this second example, there are more than two variables are involved for the study. Therefore, this is the complex hypothesis. The third example is the null hypothesis: water has no effect on plant growth. Logical hypothesis: this is the null hypothesis. An animal cannot survive in the absence of water, and this is the correct because all living things require water. This is the some interpretation. This is the some logic behind the null hypothesis. We can set up the null hypothesis in this manner. Empirical hypothesis: cotton clothing is preferable to velvet clothing in the summer. This is the if we can observe the summer, winter, and the rainy season, the population or the man changes their clothes. If we have to study what is the effect of the environment with the clothing pattern, you have to establish, you have to define the empirical hypothesis. That is statistical hypothesis. Vitamin C is beneficial to the skin. The validate this hypothesis, you would need to test it on a group of people. This is a statistical approach to the validity of the statement, verifying the statement. This is the statistical tool, or this is statistical hypothesis. In this statistical hypothesis or statistical hypothesis, it is necessary to collect some data regarding the variables, and with some data, the quantitative data, you can check your hypothesis. Therefore, this is a statistical hypothesis, and which is applicable for the quantitative research. Researcher has to use the quantitative or the statistical hypothesis in his quantitative research. Then the functions of the hypothesis. This is the more important point. What are the functions of the hypothesis? Researcher should mention or should keep mind what are the functions of the hypothesis. Hypothesis facilitates observations and experimentation. The hypothesis will lead what type of the observations you are needed and what type of the experiments you have needed. You can get idea with the hypothesis. Therefore, this is the main function of the hypothesis. It serves as the investigation is a starting point. This is the main function, or this is important function of the hypothesis. If you have confused, if you have doubt regarding the starting your observation, regarding to start your research, the hypothesis will help to start your research. Therefore, it is a investigative starting point, because the hypothesis is a path of the research. In the simple definition, the hypothesis is a path of the further research. Therefore, you have to get idea from the hypothesis. Hello, hello, what is your question? Hello. I will give time later for your question.
Sir, please continue.
Okay. This is this serves as the investigator starting point. The hypothesis aids in the verification of the observations and the ideas in steering the inquiries in the right direction. The hypothesis always help to the right direction of your research, because we can get idea regarding your research, regarding the data collection, regarding your facts collection with the help of the hypothesis. These are some basic functions of the hypothesis. Then what are the criteria of the good hypothesis? There are various types of the hypothesis. If we see the various research or research article, there are various types of the hypothesis exist. But what are the criteria of the good hypothesis are important. Therefore, I would like to explain the criteria of the good hypothesis. It is never formulated in the form of question. Your hypothesis should not be in the form of question. Our hypothesis should be in the statement, not question. Therefore, it is never formulated in the form of question. The second criteria, it should be empirically testable, whether it is right or wrong. Your hypothesis should be testable. And the second type of the criteria is basically related to the your quantitative research. If you have carrying quantitative research, then you have to see your hypothesis is testable or not. If the hypothesis is not testable, then you can remove from your research, because in quantitative research, the hypothesis should be testable, the statement should be testable. This is the basic criteria of the good hypothesis. Third, it should be specific and precise. This is the main criteria. Hypothesis should be in brief, not in paragraph wise. Someone try to write the hypothesis in paragraph, but this is not good. We can say that we cannot say that this is the good hypothesis. Hypothesis should be specific and precise. This is the main character. Therefore, if we observe the foreign authors' books or research, the hypothesis is very in limited words, a very short word or the statement. Therefore, the specific and preciseness is the main criteria of the good hypothesis. It should specify variables between which the relationship is to be established. In the statistics, hypothesis is related to establish the relationship between two or more variables. This is the main function of the hypothesis. Therefore, you have to clear idea regarding the variables which have to establish the relationship between them. If you have no clear idea, the variables which are used for the established relationship, then your hypothesis will not be said that the good hypothesis. Therefore, it should be specify variables between which the relationship is to be established. Next, it should describe one issue only. Hypothesis can be formed either in descriptive or relational form. Your hypothesis should be describe issue only, not explanation. Hypothesis need not need to the explanation or description. The hypothesis should be describe only one issue, not more than two issue, or not for the more than two issues. It should be describe one issue, but the complex hypothesis should be explain the relationship between more than two variables. But issue is only one issue. It should not be conflict with any law of nature which is known to be true, guarantees that available tools and techniques will be effectively used for the purpose of the verification. And this is the more important criteria of the good hypothesis. Your hypothesis will not be conflict with the nature law which are already developed or which are already established. Your hypothesis should be support to the established nature law, not conflict. And your hypothesis should be verified with the some basic or established techniques or the established theories. This is the basic criteria of the good hypothesis. Then it should be stated as far as possible in most simple terms, so that the same is easy. This is the wording of your hypothesis should be very simple, because your research will be helpful to the further persons or further institutions or further researcher. Therefore, the hypothesis should be in simple language. This is the main criteria, and it must explain the facts that gave rise the need for explanation. Your research hypothesis should be give the rise to the need explanation. Your hypothesis should be helpful for the further explanation in your research. This is the main criteria, and it should be amendable to testing within the reasonable time. your hypothesis should be redefined, or it should be and the next more important is that it helps in knowing the most suitable techniques for analysis, helps in the determination of the most suitable type of the researcher. These are the some basic criteria of the good hypothesis or ideal hypothesis. Researcher have to concentrate the some criteria of the good hypothesis, because the hypothesis is a indicator which will decide the nature and the quality of your research. Therefore, if we involve the hypothesis, that your is responsibility to carry out all the procedure and all the formulation of the research hypothesis techniques or the hypothesis testing. Then this is the very important point. There are various types of the tests are available for the testing of hypothesis. In statistics, there are various tests are available. We can classify the tests in parametric test and the non-parametric tests. I would like to explain the parametric tests, and then after I will explain the non-parametric test. There are various criteria available for the test, the classification of the tests. The classification or the usefulness of the tests will depends upon the objective of your research and the data which will be collected by researcher. The parametric test and non-parametric tests. The parametric tests are the tests which have the some criteria, which have some basic ideas behind the tests. There are various types of the parametric tests, that is the T test, Z test, F test, and Z test. The T test has some basic or some important uses. If you have to decide to check the significant difference between the central tendency, if you have to interest to test or to search the significant difference between the central tendency or measures of central tendency, then you have to use the t-test. With the help of t-test, we can identify or we can test the significant difference between the two or more measures of central tendency. There are some measures of central tendency which are available in statistics. These basic central tendencies are the mean, mode, median. These are some basic measures of central tendency. You have to apply the mean, mode, median. There is also geometric mean, weighted mean. There are various types of the central tendencies measures of central tendencies are available. You have to interest which type of the measures of central tendency, that depends upon the test application. Therefore, t-test is very important regarding the to check the difference between the central tendency, arithmetic mean, and geometric mean. There are two types of the main measures of tendencies are available. Most of researchers use the arithmetic mean for the study of the central tendency, measures of central tendency. And if you use the arithmetic mean for your research, there are various methods are available to work out the arithmetic mean. If you have interest to apply the various software, there are various softwares are always available. That is Spaces, R Square, MATLAB. There are various softwares are available now in the present era. There is no question. But there is one simple technique is available easily. And the technique is computer technique is the Excel. We can apply or we can find out the various statistical measurements with the help of only Excel sheet. With the Excel sheet, we can calculate mean, mode, median, geometric mean, harmonic mean, also correlation coefficient. But if we applied the arithmetic mean, then you can use the t-test. There is also criteria behind application of the arithmetic mean and the geometric mean. If your data is in percentage form, then you should apply the geometric mean. If your data is available in the proportional form, then you should always apply the geometric mean. You don't apply the arithmetic mean. With the help of geometric mean, you can study the nature of the percentage data. But if data is available in percentage form or in proportional form, then you cannot be used the arithmetic mean. You should apply the geometric mean. There is always one criteria behind the application of the arithmetic mean and geometric mean is if your data in very large form is in large amount, then you should apply the geometric mean. There are various methods are available to apply or to calculate the arithmetic mean, geometric mean, harmonic mean, and weighted mean. The utility or the use of the major substandard tendency is depends on your research and your research topic or your research objectives. The t-test, which is discovered by the William Gosset. This t-test is also known as the student t-distribution. And this t-test is used for to check the difference between the major substandard tendency. The t-test has the four important uses, and the first use is to test the significant difference between the population mean and the sample mean. If you have interest to check the population mean and sample mean, and is there difference is significant between the two means, then you can apply the t-test. With this t-test, suppose that you have interest the average income the average income of Maharashtra and the average income of the India national level. And your interest is to identify the difference between the average income of Maharashtra and average income of India, that is Indian. Then you can use this type of the t-test, because in your research, your population is the India or Indian population, and your sample is Maharashtrian population. If we calculate the average income of the Maharashtrian or Maharashtrian population or the population from the Maharashtra, and that is the sample mean. And if we assume that the sum value of the average income of the India or Indian, then your universe population mean will be the assumed value. And if you have interest to check the difference between the Maharashtra and the Indian population, the average income of the population, then you can see then you can use this t-test. Here the S indicates that the sample mean. sample mean indicates that this is the standard deviation. There is also the method is available in the statistics as well as the Naval Excel and spaces also. If we use the t-test, you can check, you can identify your conclusion. Suppose that your null hypothesis will be in this form. There is no significant difference between the population, the average income of India and average income of Maharashtrian people. This is the simple, this is null hypothesis, and alternative hypothesis will be there is significant difference between the average income of India and average income of the Maharashtrian population. Then you can use the t-test. With this t-test, you can conclude, you can predicate, or you can check your prediction with this help of the t-test. The t-test will be reject or will be accept. That depends upon the methodology, and there is a basic principle behind the rejection or the acceptance of the t-test. If the calculate there are two values are important, we can conclude or we can take the decision regarding the acceptance or rejection of the null hypothesis. You have to check furthermore two concepts, that is the degrees of freedom and the significant level. You have to set up the significant level. I already mentioned that there are various types of the significant levels are available. Generally, 1%, 5%, 10% the significant level will be considered. And there is one important dimension of the testing of hypothesis, the degrees of freedom. And the meaning of degrees of freedom I will explain in the next slide. But with the help of the significant level, the degrees of freedom, you can compare the calculated value and the table value. The table value, we can say that the p value. The further word is also used in the some statistical methods or books or the spaces, p value, and the t is the calculated value. You have to compare these two values, calculated value and the given table value. If we consider the given table value of the concerned test t, and if the calculated value is smaller than the table value, then we can conclude that our null hypothesis is if your hypothesis tested value is greater than your table value, then you can say that your null hypothesis is rejected. If the calculated value is more than the table value, then we can say that your null hypothesis is rejected at the significant level, which is already we set up, and the degrees of freedom, which is defined according to the test value or test criteria. The degrees of freedom will depend on the applications of the test value or the application of test. According to test, the degrees of freedom will be changed. In this t-test, if we have to check the significant difference between the population mean and sample mean, in this case, degrees of freedom will be n-1. Suppose that sample is 10, then we can define the degrees of freedom n-10, that is 10 minus 1, that is the degrees of freedom will be 9. And if the calculated value of the t-test is smaller than the table value of given t-test, then your null hypothesis is accepted. You should remember that. You should take care. Always zero hypothesis or null hypothesis is tested, not alternative hypothesis. You always tested our null hypothesis. If null hypothesis is rejected, it means that our alternative hypothesis will be accepted. Your null hypothesis is accepted, it means that our null hypothesis will be rejected. In this case, our null hypothesis was there is no significant difference between the average income of India and average income of Maharashtra. This is the null hypothesis. If it is true, or if the null hypothesis is accepted, then we can conclude that there is no significant difference between the average income of India and average income of Maharashtra. Such type of the conclusion we can find in this t-test. Therefore, the first use of the t-test is to test the significant difference between the the population mean and sample mean. If you have to check, or if you have to interest to test the significant difference between the population and the sample mean, you should use the t-test formula or this use. Next, the t-test, the another formula or the next use of the t-test is very, there are two types of the t-tests. The second use of the t-test, if you have interest to test the significant difference between the two independent average means, then you can use the use of t-test, second use of t-test. Suppose that you have interest to the average income of the Maharashtra and average income of the Gujarat state. If you have interest to test the significant difference between the average income of Maharashtra and average income of the Gujarat state, then you can use the t-test, the second use of the t-test, and this is the second use of the t-test. This is both the variables are independent variables, not dependent variables. Therefore, the second use of t-test is known as to test the significant difference between the two independent variables. And therefore, I choose the example, the average income of the Maharashtra and the average income of the Gujarat state. You have interest to check the average income of the Gujarat and average income of the Maharashtra. Then you can use the second use of the t-test, and that use is known as to test the significant difference between the two independent sample means. Here also the x1 bar and x2 bar are this is the average of the first sample and average of the second sample, average mean of the second sample. The S1 is the standard deviation of the first sample and S2 is the standard deviation of the second sample. The methods are very easy. If we apply the Excel, these average and these standard deviations will be calculated easily with the Excel sheet or with the another method. Therefore, the second use of the t-test is very important. If you have interest to identify the significance difference between the two independent variables or two independent factors. The third use of the t-test is very important, and such type of the third use of the t-test is applicable if you have to interest to check the significant difference between two dependent sample means. According to the two dependent sample means, you have check the effects of some policy, government policy, or some educational policy. Then you can use the third use of the t-test, and the use is known as to test the significant difference between the two dependent sample means. Suppose that you have to interest to check the impact of the education policy or education expenditure on the quality of education. Then you will go to the data from the budget or the economic survey of India or Maharashtra, and you have collected the expenditure of the education, and in other words, you can collect the data from regarding the quality education or the variables which reflects the quality educations among the students. Then you can use the t-test of the third use of t-test, and then if you can mark or if you can use such type of the t-test, if you have interest to classify or to verify the use of the effectiveness of the teaching method, then you can collect the data before the teaching method or before the tuition and the after the tuitions. Then you can work out the difference is significant or not. Therefore, in this t-test, we can calculate the difference values, that is after minus before, and these difference values will use for the t-test. According to the t-test, we can classify, you can test, or you can study the effectiveness of any policy by collecting the data which is previous and the after the implication of the policy, and with this t-test we can conclude. The next use of the t-test is very important, and that the use is known as the correlation coefficient, significance of correlation coefficient. The researcher has to use the statistical tool to establish the relationship between two or more variables. There are various methods are available to establish the relationship between two or more variables. In statistics, there are various types of the correlation coefficients methods are available. According to your data, you can select, you can use the correlation coefficient method. There are available the Karl-Pearson's correlation coefficient, also Spearman's rank correlation coefficient method. There is also concurrent correlation coefficient method. These are the simple correlation coefficient methods are available. If we study the relationship between only two variables, then the simple correlation coefficient will be useful for your research. But if you have more interest to establish the relationship between two or more variables, then there are two types of the correlation coefficients are available for the researcher. One is multiple correlation coefficient, and another type of correlation coefficient known as the partial correlation coefficient. In partial correlation coefficients, you can calculate the correlation coefficient between the some variables, keeping some variables are constant. And in the multiple correlation coefficient, you have to establish the correlation coefficient between the given all variables. And in simple correlation coefficient, you have to establish the correlation coefficient only two variables. If we have applied the simple correlation coefficient, then and you have interest to work out the significance of your correlation coefficient, then t-test will be applicable. With this t-test, you can check your significance of your correlation coefficient. Suppose that your correlation coefficient is 0.5 or 0.6. The question is arise here: is the correlation coefficient significant or not? There is absolutely the correlation coefficient has some values. That may be 0, that may be negative, that may be positive, but question is still exist regarding its significance. The responsibility of the researcher is to establish the relationship between your two selected variables with the significant value, and you have to prove your correlation coefficient is significant or not with the help of this t-test. And the R is the simple correlation coefficient. If we substitute the value of the R and N is the number of pairs, then you will get the t-test formula. But how to calculate the correlation coefficient between the two variables, that is simple correlation coefficient? I already explained there are various methods are available. If we use the Karl-Pearson's correlation coefficient method, there are 4 or 5 kinds are available to work out the Karl Pearson's correlation coefficient. That is the by definition, direct method, indirect method, assumed method. There are various types of the methods are available to work out the correlation coefficient. Researchers should have to apply. The correlation coefficient method depends on the correlation coefficient or his research interest. If your data is qualitative, then you cannot use the Karl Pearson's correlation coefficient method. You have to use the rank correlation coefficient method, because the Spearman's rank correlation coefficient method is applicable in the qualitative data. Therefore, you should decide the use of the correlation coefficient depends on your data, which is collected by researcher to the further investigation or to further study. Therefore, this is the fourth use of the t-test. With the help of t-test, we can check the significance of the correlation coefficient, which is already we calculated between the two variables in your research. The main responsibility of the researcher to check out, to work out, or to conclude with some scientific steps, with some statistic ideas with the t-test. If you have interest, then you should apply the t-test formula for the test of significance correlation coefficient. This is also Z-test is discovered by the R.A. Fisher. This is also parametric test, and this test has two main uses or applications. In the fourth use of the t-test, with the help of t-test, we can calculate, or you can work out the significance of only one correlation coefficient between the two variables. This is the limitations of the t-test. With the help of t-test, we can check the significance of the calculated correlation coefficient between the two variables or more than two variables. That depends upon the correlation coefficient which was applied in your research, that is the simple, partial, or multiple. But there is only one correlation coefficient. You can check for its significance for the research. This is the main limitations of the t-test, but the R.A. Fisher overcome to the limitations of the t-test, which is discovered by the William Gossett. And according to the t-test, a Z-test, which is discovered by the R.A. Fisher, it helps to check the two type of the differences. Therefore, the Z-test has two uses, and the first use is very simple: to test the significant difference between the population correlation coefficient and the sample correlation coefficient. This is the main use. The population correlation coefficient and sample correlation coefficient. If you have interest, the relationship between the two variables among the population and the correlation coefficient between the two variables among the selected samples, and you have to check the difference in significance between the population correlation coefficient and sample correlation coefficient. This is your interest area. Then you can use the Z-test. Suppose that if you have interest, the growth rate and the living standard at the national level of the India. For this, you have collected the data of the growth rates of the GDP of the India and the standard of life of India at national level, and you calculated the correlation coefficient between the growth rate of India and the growth rate and the living standard of the Indian at the national level, and the value of the correlation coefficient between the growth rates and the living standard will got. there is no confusion, there is no doubt. The some value will be established in the both the variables. The correlation between the growth rate of the GDP or GDP and the standard living of India. This is the sample. This is the population correlation coefficient, and you have interest to study the relationship between the Indian growth rate or Maharashtra's growth rate or the Maharashtra's GDP and living standard of Maharashtrian. What type of the correlation between the two variables? That is the Maharashtra's GDP and living standard of Maharashtrian population. And you establish the relationship between the Maharashtra GDP and the living standard of Maharashtrian. In first stage, you already established the correlation coefficient between the GDP of India and the living standard of India at the national level. That is known as the population correlation coefficient. And in the second phase, you have already discussed the correlation coefficient between the Maharashtra's GDP and living standard of Maharashtrian. Therefore, we obtained two types of the correlation coefficient, the population correlation coefficient and the sample correlation coefficient. Your interest is to identify the significant difference between the two variables, that is the Maharashtra and the Indian GDP and the living of standard. Then you can use the Z test, and the use of the Z test is known as to test the significant difference between the population correlation coefficient and sample correlation coefficient. Here the pi is known as the population correlation, and mu is known as the population correlation coefficient, and another variable you can use the sample correlation coefficient. Then Z test will be helpful for the identify the significance correlation coefficient between the population correlation coefficient and the sample correlation coefficient. This is the first use of the Z test, which is discovered by the R.A. Fisher. And the second use of the Z test is very important. And the second use of the Z test is to identify or to test the significant difference between the two correlation coefficient between the two sample. If you have interest to identify the correlation coefficient between the two sample correlation coefficient, then you can use the Z test. Suppose that you have interest to the GDP and standard living of population among the Maharashtra and the Goa state. Which state is more effectively implementing the use of GDP for the development of the society or the standard living of the population? We can always observe the debate between the debate regarding the development of Maharashtra and Gujarat. I have no interest more focus to the such type of the debates. But if you have interest to check the efficiency in the expenditure in the Maharashtra and the other state, Gujarat or maybe Andhra Pradesh or maybe Karnataka, then you can select the two variables, expenditure and the government expenditure and the living of standard of the population. If we have established the relationship between the expenditure and the living of standard of living of the Maharashtrian population, and we obtain the correlation coefficient between the two variables of the regarding Maharashtra, and another phase we can calculate the correlation coefficient between the public expenditure or government expenditure of the Gujarat state and the living standard of the Gujarat state. We will get the two correlation coefficients, and we have to conclude, or we have to more interest which state is more implementing the government policies regarding the development of the society, that the increasing the living standard of life or population. You have interest, then you can use such type of the Z test. With this Z test, we can compare or we can compare the two states correlation coefficients, and after the conclusion we can make the important remark regarding your research, which state is effectively implementing the government policies, and or the government expenditure or public expenditure. Such type of the Z test will be useful for the your study. If you have interest to identify the two variables between the two cities, between the two capitals, between the two persons, you can use between the two companies, you can use such type of the t-test. With this t-test or z-test, according to z-test we can use or we can identify the significance difference between the correlation coefficient, that the population correlation coefficient, sample correlation coefficient, the first use, and the second use is the correlation coefficient between the two sample correlation coefficients. With the z-test, in this the z-test is more superior than the t-test, because t-test use only one correlation coefficient, but
Hello. 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 Hello.
हाँ बोलिए मैम।
HRDC लेफ्ट झाले
हेलो।
HRDC नाही दिसत आहे कनेक्शन मध्ये, त्यांचं कनेक्शन बहुतेक हे
काही
झालंय.
अडचण आली असेल त्यांना, येतील ना ते परत.
स्नेहल मॅम. हॅलो स्नेहल मॅम. हॅलो. हॅलो स्नेहल मॅम.
यस मैडम।
मैम आवाज नहीं सुनाई दे रही है, शायद कुछ टेक्निकल प्रॉब्लम हो सकता है, वो पार्टिसिपेंट में भी नहीं दिखता है।
जस्ट अ मिनट। हॅलो हॅलो
Oh, hello everyone.
आवाज येत नाही.
Listen. Yes. Listen, everyone. There is MOOC session till 2 p.m. Everyone have to join for a MOOC session, and our afternoon session will be there on 4 p.m. So you can left the meeting now.
अभी 2 बजे ज्वाइन होना है क्या?
नहीं सर, 2 बजे तक आपको MOOC का लेक्चर करना है।
अच्छा,
और यस, 2 बजे तक MOOC का लेक्चर होगा, और उसके बाद जो आफ्टरनून का सेशन है तो वो 4 बजे
हाँ।
ज्वाइन करना है, मतलब 1 पौने 4 बजे सबको ज्वाइन करना है।
तो ये भी
वो 4 बजे
यूट्यूब की
शुरू
लिंक
होगा।
आएगी क्या?
हाँ, लिंक शेयर कर दी जाएगी। अभी यहाँ से लेफ्ट हो
ओके।
सकते हैं आप लोग।
ओके।
हॅलो मॅम,
हाँ
25 नंबर बोलताय. ह्याच्यासाठी बायोडाटा पुढचा मग
मिळेल सर, मिळेल. अजून माझ्याकडेच नाही आलाय, आला की मी शेअर करेल ग्रुपवर.
मॅडम आता आम्ही जॉईन केव्हा व्हायचं?
सर एक
हॅलो.
अराउंड 3:45 वाजता. आणि
4:45
आता
वाजता का?
मूकचे लेक्चर करायचे आहेत, मूकचे लेक्चर. त्या लिंक शेअर होतील ग्रुपवर.
हो.
हेलो देशमुख सर.
बोला हा.
सर चालू करा लेक्चर.
ओके. Hello. Sorry for the disturbance due to connectivity problem. I was discussing the. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes sir.
Okay. I was discussing the use of the Z test and I already explained what is the role of the Z test. The role of Z test is more important than the T test. According to Z test, we can identify the significant difference between the two correlation coefficients. And the two correlation coefficient may be classified into two categories, that is the population correlation coefficient and sample correlation coefficient. And the next is the two correlation coefficient between the two samples. Your research area will be decide the use of Z test which is applicable. That's depend upon your criteria and this is the next F test, not Z test. This is the F test. F test is also known as the variance test. The F test is useful for the testing the significant difference between the variance or variations among the selected variables. If you have interest to verify the variations in the selected variables are significant or not. Suppose that you have interest the inequality between economic inequality between the Maharashtrian population. This is your interest area. Then you can use the such type of the F test, that is the variance test. Here, numerator and denominator, the S1, the standard deviation of the first sample and the standard deviation of the second sample. These standard deviations explains the variations between the two samples. With the F test, you can compare or you can identify the differences are or the variations are significant or not. According to the F test, you can calculate or you can conclude the variations among the two samples. This test is also known as the variance test, and it is discovered by the Fisher. Such type of the tests are known as the parametric test. There is one more test, and the test is a proportional test. This type of the test is also useful. Such type of the test is applicable regarding your yes or no questionnaire. If you selected data with the yes or no answer, then such type of the proportion test will be applicable. The proportional test is applicable very nicely if your data is calculated in the proportional or in the percentage form. If you have data in percentage form, if you have no interest to establish the relationship between the two or more variables, or it is not possible to establish the relationship between the two variables or more variables, then you can use the proportion test. According to this test, you can conclude which proportion is more significant or insignificant with the proportion test. This is also applicable for the research. And the next test is known as the non-parametric test. That is the chi-square test. The use of this test is very important. This test is a non-parametric test. The parametric and non-parametric test, the classification is very important. If your data is related to the qualitative, then you can use this non-parametric test. The test is also known as the chi-square test, and the t-test, F-test, and J-test are parametric tests. Since these tests assumes normal population, normal distribution, but is non-parametric test or distribution-free test. The normal population, the definition or the meaning of the normal population is very simple in the statistical books or the statistical form. We can define the population, normal population, and the abnormal population. The population having the equal mean, median, and mode is known as the normal population or the distribution. If the distribution has the equal mean, median, and mode, then you can say that the population is normal population. And if there is no equality between the arithmetic mean, median, and mode, then we can say that the population is abnormal population. That is the arithmetic mean, the mean, median, arithmetic mean, that is AM, is equal to mean and is equal to mode. If this condition is hold, then you can say that the population is normal population. This is the arithmetic mean, median, and mode. These three instruments or these three tools are equal, then you can say that the population is normal population. But there is no possibility the population or distribution is always normal. If the population or distribution is abnormal, then you can use the another test, non-parametric test. And the non-parametric test is known as the main non-parametric test is. Hello, do you have some problem? If this condition is fulfilled, then you can say that the population is normal population. And if this condition is not hold, suppose that there is an inequality between the arithmetic mean, median, and mode, then you can say that the population is abnormal population or distribution. The researcher should have some idea behind the application of the chi-square test or Z test or T test or F test. Your distribution or your population is normal population, then you can use the T, Z or F test. But your population is abnormal population, that is your population has no equality between the mean, mode, and median, then you should apply the non-parametric test, that is chi-square test. Also, the chi-square test you can use in the qualitative data. And the main use or the important use of this test is to examine or to test the significant difference between your prediction and your observations. This is a very important. The test is simplest and most widely used in non-parametric test. In statistics, the Greek letter, this is the chi-square. This is the chi-square. This test is useful for the abnormal population. This symbol indicates that the summation, and the summation indicates that the sum of all the differences are the quotients of the average square to the expected frequencies. Here, O indicates that your observed value, your data, your collected data is known as the observed values. And only observed value or observed observations are not sufficient to this use of the chi-square test. You have to estimate the another values, frequencies. Therefore, this E is known as the expected frequencies. O is observed frequencies and E is expected frequencies. You have to use the formula, and this formula is E is equal to RT into CT divided by TT for the expected frequencies. This is the formula. RT and CT, the RT is total, row total, and CT is column total, and the TT is known as the total of total. With this formula, you can use the expected frequencies from the observed frequencies. After the completion of the expected frequencies, then you can carry some calculations, that is take the deviations of the expected frequencies from the observed frequencies, then take their square and divide by the expected frequencies to the square of the deviations, and then take the sum of these quotients of the square of the deviations to the expected frequencies. The test will be the chi-square value will be occurred, and according to this chi-square test, which is discovered by the Carl Pearson in 19, and therefore this is a very important test for the researcher. Researcher can be think for the chi-square test if the population or distribution is abnormal population, or the data is the qualitative data, you can use this test. Some various methods are used for the qualitative research hypothesis. These are the most important methods are available. There is also one statistical tool is available for the testing of hypothesis, that is the one-way and two-way analysis, one-way, two-way variance analysis. with the help of one-way, two-way analysis, you can classify, you can study your data, some variables with the cross verification. Therefore, this is known as the one-way, two-way classification. With the one-way, two-way variance calculations or classification, you can apply the one-way, two-way application test, and you can conclude, or you can find out conclusion regarding your hypothesis if you use the cross-sectional analysis. This is the one-way, two-way analysis, very important tool is available. Here, I'm not explaining the one-way, two-way analysis. That is the very important, that is a very hard calculations which are not here applicable or not necessary. Therefore, this is the non-parametric test, and the one-way, two-way is also parametric test is available. There are some, if researcher has set up, or researcher had this set up the, or researchers have, some researchers have the interest to check the qualitative hypothesis. Therefore, there are various types of the methods are available for the verification or the testing of the qualitative hypothesis. Some researcher can use the qualitative hypothesis. There are qualitative hypotheses are available, or you can establish the qualitative hypothesis, and the qualitative hypothesis can be tested with some criteria or with some types. The most important method is available for testing of your qualitative hypothesis, that is the data triangulation. This triangulation data method is available for data triangulation. Data triangulation in this process, data triangulation is common technique is in quantitative research. Also qualitative research is usually involves confirmation of the data. This is important. You can confirmation of the data, those who calculated and analyzed it. Often other scientists who specialized in similar areas also review of the data. You should here compare the two types of the data. One, the first data researcher is collected, and you can compare your selected data with the data which is selected by the other researcher or the data collector. With this way, you can you can test your hypothesis with this data triangulation. The next method is triangulation method is available. That is the theory triangulation. Theory triangulation involves using multiple theoretical methods to study the particular phenomena or issues. You use theory triangulation by the testing of competing hypothesis. You can compare your hypothesis with the available theoretical facts. With this type of the triangulation may resolve data contradictions or help or understand your conclusions from multiple perspectives. You should compare your hypothesis, the qualitative hypothesis, with collected data in the context of the established theory. With this established theory, you can conclude regarding your research. The methodological triangulation this is also important. This helps ensure objective analysis and prevents researchers' bias in research results. It also helps to refine the study of identify gaps. Researchers use the type of the triangulation method often using methodological triangulation. This is methodological triangulation. If we study, there are various methods are available for data collection and the study method, research study. You should compare your method with another methods for the data collection, and you can compare your method with the another methods regarding your research topic or regarding your research objectives. A scale triangulation the scale triangulation involves using multiple scales when assessing the same issues or behavior. This type of the triangulation compares the validity. Such type of the triangulation is also important. You can collect or you can separate your data or compare your data with various scales. Suppose that the expenditure habits of the adult population. This is the one scale. Second, the expenditure habits of the child, the expenditure habits of the elders, or the expenditure habits of the youth. You can scale your data in this method, and you can check your hypothesis with this triangulation method. External validity triangulation. This is method is also important. If we consider or a researcher use external validity triangulation when assessing whether people with different health conditions have similar symptoms or patients or of behavior. The sample people with diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, and asthma. Then the researcher compared them similarities in the symptoms and behaviors. If you collected data from one group, then you should compare data with the another group regarding your characteristics or variables which are identified for your research. Here I explain the one example for the regarding the external validity, how to use the external validity for the testing of hypothesis in the qualitative research. And the internal validity triangulation is also available. Internal validity triangulation is process of comparing diverse data sets or results. The goal of this triangulation method is to find inconsistency or difference that show weakness in the validity of the research. If the process of discovers any weakness, it enables the identification of these problems so the study can be strengthened. And this is example a study of on chronic pain relief compared chronic pain patients who were prescribed pain medications with similar patients receiving no pain medications. In this assess patients' pain levels differently. This finding leads to redefinement in the data collection and analysis, which this is the example related to the internal triangulation. And the last proximity of the triangulation. Proximity triangulation is a qualitative research techniques in which researchers study events or behaviors close in the time to each other. By doing so, researcher can compare similar events or behavior throughout a specific period in one setting without having to move from one source to another source. You can use the proxy variable for your qualitative research hypothesis testing. You can check the hypothesis, the data which are collected for your research with the setting the source of using another source. This minimizes the occurrences of researchers bias in the study. This is the example. Social scientists set up the research study to compare how different generation in families use social media. They find participants from the different age groups such as school, children, parents and grandparents, and interview. These are some various groups. Here we can use the proxy variable, and the use of the proxy variable is known as the proximity triangulation. Using this method, they compare all the age groups' relationship with social media without establishment separate studies that may introduce the unwanted variable or bias. This is the triangulation method is also available for qualitative hypothesis testing. There are always use some method such as the interview method, focus method, or informal method. Or these some methods are available for the testing of the qualitative hypothesis. researcher can use the method which is appropriate for his or her research. That depends upon the objectives of the researcher or research, and the available time, money, and the his depth of the study. That depends upon, or these variables can be research hypothesis techniques which will be applicable or not applicable. That depends upon the researchers. These are the some very important research methods are available for the testing of hypothesis. In this testing of hypothesis, some points are very important. Some components are important, and this is the one component is important. There is the p-value. A p-value is a metric that expresses the likelihood that an observed difference could have occurred by chance as per the value decrease. This is the p-value we can use, or we can compare your test values with the p-value, and after comparison, you can hypothesis.
हॅलो, माझा आवाज येतो का? हॅलो,
हॅलो.
हा स्नेहल मॅडम, कुणी? हॅलो, स्नेहल मॅडम, सेशन कंटिन्यू होणार आहे की लॉग आउट करायचंय?
Again, sorry for disconnectivity of the internet. I am present. Again, sorry for disconnectivity with
Okay, sir.
internet because today's internet is not working properly. Therefore, we are suffering from some problem. This is the p-value, and the role of the p-value is important in research. With the same basis, we can argue that the role of the table value of the tests if we observe the statistics books, the last pages are related to the test values. If you have more interest to use the test values from the table value, you can use the statistical books. This is the p-value, and the another concept of the this this is hypothesis testing is degree of freedom. Degrees of freedom are the maximum number of logically independent values which may vary in data sample. Degrees of freedom are calculated by the calculation of degrees of freedom is very important. But the calculation of degrees of freedom, this is the basic general rule. Subtracting 1 from the number of the atoms within the data sample. This is the basic rule of the calculation of the degrees of freedom. And the degrees of freedom are maximum number of logically independent values. This indicates that the scope to the validity of your research or the hypothesis. The degrees of freedom, we can calculate the degrees of freedom with various method that depends upon the test. And the earliest the concept of the degrees of freedom was noted in the early 1980s with the works of the mathematician and astronomer Carl Friedrich Gauss. His contribution is important regarding the degrees of freedom. And degrees of freedom discussed in the various forms of the hypothesis testing in statistics, such as the chi-square test. This is the degrees of freedom. If we consider the t-test, then in the t-test, the degrees of freedom, we can calculate the 4 types with the 4 type degrees of freedom. That is the degrees of freedom. We can calculate the t-test in the first case, n-1. This is the first form, method to degrees of freedom, work out the t-test in the first use. We already discussed in the second use of the t-test, the degrees of freedom in the second use of the t-test will be calculated n-2. This is the formula for the calculation of the t-test. Second use of the t-test. The third use, that is the to test the significant difference between the 2 dependent sample means. In this test, also the use of t-test will be, our degrees of freedom can be calculated with the formula of the n-1. This is also degrees of freedom. And we already discussed the 4th use of the t-test, that is the to check the correlation, the significance value of the correlation coefficients. And in this use of the t-test, the degrees of freedom can be calculated with the formula n-2. This is the degrees of these formulas will useful for the define the degrees of freedom for the t-test. We also discussed in the F test, and in the F test, there is pair of the degrees of freedom, because in F test the 2 samples will be studied at the same time. Therefore, the degrees of freedom in the F test, the sample, according to sample size, the degrees of freedom will be differ. That is the n1-2. This is the 1. n1-2. This is the 1 degrees of freedom, and the another degrees n degrees of freedom n-2. n2-2. Sorry, n2-2. This is another degrees of freedom. Therefore, in the F test, you have to use the pair of degrees of freedom. According to this formula, you can calculate the degrees of freedom, the pair of degrees of freedom in the F test. And the Z test, we have no calculate the degrees of freedom. Also, if we use the chi-square test, the chi-square test, in the chi-square test, the formula of the degrees of freedom is r-1. That is r means the number of rows, r-1. r-1 into c-1. That is c-1. This is the formula of the degrees of freedom for the chi-square test. With the help of the chi-square test, or for the chi-square test, we can calculate the degrees of freedom. For testing of hypothesis, there are four important components. That is the test criteria, which is applicable, which is you applied. What is the number of degrees of freedom and the significance levels, and the next is the degrees of freedom. Therefore, according to these some components, we can test our hypothesis. And this is the also more one component is important, that is the related to the degrees of freedom. The question is important. Which hypothesis, one tail test and two test hypothesis testing is available. Which test you will apply in your research? The one tail test, also called the directional test, consider the critical region of the data would result in the null hypothesis being rejected if the sample falls into it inversibility, meaning the acceptance of the alternative hypothesis. In one tail test, test critical distribution area is one side, meaning test sample is either greater or lesser than the specific value. This is the one side test, one tail test. Also, there is two tail test. This is also a test sample is checked out be greater or less than range of the value in two tail test, implying that the critical distribution area is two side. If the sample falls within this range, the alternative hypothesis will be accepted and null hypothesis will be rejected. This is the one important criteria or the fact related to your testing hypothesis. In your testing hypothesis, you have to mention which type is used. One tail type or say a two tail type is used in your research. We have to mention in your procedure. This is the main important accept of this testing hypothesis, and this is the one important thing is related to your hypothesis testing, and this is the type 1 error and type 2 error. Such type of the calculations or conclusions is related to your hypothesis testing. There are various situations or possibilities regarding your hypothesis. I already explained your hypothesis is tentative conclusion or possible results. That result may be wrong or result may be true. That depends upon your the data collection method or your understanding or your prediction. Prediction may be wrong or prediction may be correct. Researcher has to focus the types of the error. Research has to concentrate to minimize the types of error, because the types of error will define or will decide the quality of your research. The types of error will be arise as per your data collection method or the research or the method which is you applied. There are four possible conclusions or there are four possibilities regarding your hypothesis testing. Suppose that your hypothesis is correct. Your hypothesis is correct, no doubt. Your prediction or your hypothesis is correct. And in your research methodology, in your research, you applied the research methodology and you collected data and you checked out your data collection method. Also, you carried out the all procedure of the testing of the hypothesis, and your true hypothesis is accepted by your test. Your hypothesis will be regarding to the null hypothesis, and I already mentioned that you should always test your null hypothesis, not alternative hypothesis, because if we check or if we test the null hypothesis, another counterpart alternative hypothesis will be already checked. If your hypothesis is true and your test accept it, your null hypothesis is true and your test accept it, then your decision will be correct. There is no error, there is no anything wrong, because your decision is correct, your prediction is correct, and your procedure is support it properly. Your all procedure of the research is support it properly with significant data and significant level. If your hypothesis is correct and your null hypothesis is correct and your research techniques or your test is accepted, then there is no wrong or there is no error. That is, your decision is correct. Your hypothesis is true, it's accepted, then the decision is correct. There is no chance to false or there is no chance to mistake. That is correct decision. Suppose that your hypothesis will wrong. Your null hypothesis is wrong. Basically, you assume or you predicate the wrong assumption or wrong prediction, and our test accept and your test reject it. If your test rejected the wrong hypothesis, then that will be also correct decision. There is no something wrong, because you already assume the wrong hypothesis, your null hypothesis as a wrong, and your test reject it, then such type of the decision is also correct decision. There is no mistake. There is no error. Error-free research will be you work out. But there is also more two possibilities remain. And what are the two possibilities are remain? Regarding the type 1 error and regarding the type 2 error. If your null hypothesis, which is we are going to test, and if your null hypothesis is correct, your null hypothesis is correct, but your data is not supporting your null hypothesis, your data is not accepting your data, while your null hypothesis is correct. Your null hypothesis is correct, but your data is not supporting it, or your test is not accepting it, then that is serious matter. If your null hypothesis is Sorry for this again, discontinuity of the internet because the cloudy days have created some problems. The type first error and type second error. The type first error is occurred when your null hypothesis is true, but your data or your research or your test reject it. Then the type 1 error occurred. That is the true hypothesis. Then if your null hypothesis is true, but it's reject by test, then the type 1 error occurred. In the another situation is possible in your research, and the another situation is your null hypothesis is false. Your null hypothesis is false because the hypothesis may be wrong or may be true. If null hypothesis is wrong and our data accept it or test accept it at the given level of significance level and the with degrees of freedom, then the second error will be occurred. Type second error will be occurred because our null hypothesis is already wrong, but test accept it. Therefore, the second error will be occurred, and the second error, type second error, will be most dangerous than the error first. Because if we consider the research having the type second error, and some researcher or some policymaker will use your research which has already the type second error, that will be more dangerous because the conclusions or the recommendations which are depends on the type second error will absolutely will leads to abuse or most dangerous effect, negative effect. Therefore, the type second error is more dangerous or most dangerous to the type first error. The researcher should aware about the type second error. The type second error will be occurred due to your wrong data collection method or insufficient data collection method or misleading data or the procedure which is already you applied is not appropriate. There are some reasons, there are some causes to occur the type second error, but type second error is most dangerous. You have to keep mind. Try to avoid both the errors, type first and second error, but you should most concentrate to avoid the type second error. These are the some facts related to the testing of hypothesis. The researcher should use the appropriate test for the discussion or for the his or her research. The researcher's responsibility is to test your hypothesis. If you introduce hypothesis in your research, your responsibility is increased. If you have no include the hypothesis, then there is no problem for testing of hypothesis. But you introduce the hypothesis in your research, it is your prime duty to check it. And you have to apply proper method to test the hypothesis. You have no right to conclude with oral observations. Some researchers try to conclude with the simple observations, simple percentage, and they compare the percentage below the 50%, above the 50%, and they can conclude the null hypothesis rejected and null hypothesis accepted. Such type of the methods you have not applied in your research. You have to apply the appropriate method in your research. Some researcher or some PhD students or some lecturers or some professors, associate professors or assistant professors have no need to some basic statistics, basic statistics or mathematics. You have no acceptancy or you have no the sufficient knowledge, then don't worry. You can use the various softwares which are available easily. If we use simple Excel sheet in the computer, then you can carry out some statistics or some statistical methods or mathematical methods which are applicable to your research. If you have some knowledge, if you have some training, then you can use the Spaces software, R-Square software, or MATLAB. There are various softwares are available. You have to write which software you will use as per your need, as per your time, as per your available money. You can apply the method for the testing of hypothesis, but you have to aware about the appropriate method for your research. Without appropriate method, your results will be misleading. And misleading results will convert in the type 2 second error. Your research should be errorless or minimum error, or it should be minimum less error, your research. Therefore, you have to apply the various methods are available. Which method is useful? Which method is easy to your research? You have to decide. You can take some help from other statistician or some experts which are available to easy. There is also some online training courses are available for the how to use the research methodology properly. You can use some methods to carry your research, but in social sciences, you have to use some statistics or some mathematics, because in social sciences, also in pure sciences, some subjects have need to use the statistics as well as the mathematics. If we consider the zoology, there are various methods are available for the statistics methods are available for their tests or hypothesis. You have to use appropriate testing method for your analysis or your conclusion. But without testing of hypothesis, your research will not be complete. If you includes the hypothesis, then your prime responsibility to check it with proper way, with proper method. The various methods are available. Statistics methods are available. The spaces you will be used for your conclusion. These are some facts which are related to the testing of hypothesis. The testing of hypothesis is a tool which indicates your quality of your research. researchers should aware about the data collection, sources of data collection. The data collection, the sources of data collection should be appropriate and should be authentic. We are observing that some researchers are using the daily newspaper, the daily newspaper as a source, but the daily newspaper or the textbooks are using as a sources. But the daily newspaper is not a authentic source. If you are going to using the online sources and you are using the Wikipedia, then your research will be qualityless. You have idea regarding the authenticity of the online sources. Wikipedia is very dangerous, non-authentic source. If you are using the data from the Wikipedia, then your research will be misleading. You have to avoid such type of the non-authentic e-resources. Some published books or some published newspapers, you have aware about the quality or you have aware about their authenticity. Without authenticity, you cannot use the data for your research, because research will play the pivotal role in the policy or the policy making or the implementation of the policy. Your research will be useful for the society. Your research will be useful for the researcher. Therefore, it is your prime duty to use the authentic sources, to use the appropriate methodology for testing of hypothesis. You should aware regarding your publication. The researcher should publish your research in quality publication. If you are observing that in present era in social media, there are various sources are available to publish your research, but it is hard task to publish for the quality. Or quality research is the main task to the publications. You have to identify the quality quality research, because if your work has more quality, then it is also prime duty to publish in quality research publication. The hypothesis testing or testing of hypothesis has many dimensions, various dimensions. Each and every dimension plays the pivotal role in your research. You have to learn some basic ideas as well as the deep knowledge regarding the types of hypothesis and the testing of hypothesis methods. There are various methods. Some methods I already discussed in this lecture. I have knowledge, I have idea regarding this is not sufficient lecture, but I try to focus some dimensions of the hypothesis, testing of hypothesis in given specific time, and also it is not good functioning or it is not properly functioning the internet also. Therefore, I would like to conclude this session because the internet is not working properly. But you have to use the research methodology, methods, hypothesis methods, or the hypothesis testing methods. You have to use properly, and you have to carry it out with some basic formulas, with some basic ideas. If it is possible to use some softwares, you have to use some softwares. This is the idea behind this presentation. I conclude that. I also express my thanks to all the participants who are here present. while suffering from the connectivity problem. Therefore, I would like to express my special gratitude to all the faculty member present in this program. Thank you. Some who are the Maharashtrian students are available? महाराष्ट्रीयन स्टुडंट आहेत का काही?
हो
हो
सर
आहे सर.
आहेत सर, भरपूर आहेत.
आहेत. मी फक्त एक 10 ते 10 मिनिटांमध्ये तुमचं मी फक्त हे सांगतो मी मांडणी केली ती तुम्हाला समजली याची गॅरंटी आहे, ते वाद नाही माझा. फक्त आपण आपल्या संशोधनामध्ये परिकल्पनेचा वापर करताना मात्र थोडा वापर जरूर केला पाहिजे. इतिहासामधलं जर संशोधन आपण सोडलं, इतिहासामध्ये एक संशोधन असू शकतं, परिकल्पना विना संशोधन इतिहासामध्ये असू शकतं. मात्र दुसऱ्या विषयामध्ये संशोधन जर करत असं आपण तर मात्र आपल्याला परिकल्पना असावी लागते. वास्तविक पाहता ज्या संशोधनामध्ये परिकल्पना नाही हे संशोधन क्वालिटीचं नाही असं म्हणणार नाही, कारण इतिहासासारख्या विषयामधलं संशोधन हे परिकल्पना विरहित संशोधन हे अधिक क्वालिटीचं असतं असं आपण म्हणतो. आणि म्हणून परिकल्पना नसली तरी चालेल, मात्र परिकल्पना जर आपल्या संशोधनामध्ये असेल तर ती आपली जबाबदारी आहे त्या परिकल्पनेचं परीक्षण करणे. परिकल्पनेचं परीक्षण करण्यासाठी मात्र अनेक पद्धती आपल्याला उपलब्ध आहेत, त्या पद्धती सांगितलेल्या आहेत. त्याच्यामध्ये एक प्राकलिक आणि प्राचीन आणि अप्राचीन परिकल्पना आपण असं म्हणतो. 2 परिकल्पना आपल्याला नेहमी मांडायच्या असतात, शून्य परिकल्पना आणि वैकल्पिक परिकल्पना. जी शून्य परिकल्पना आहे त्या शून्य परिकल्पनेचं एक वैशिष्ट्य असं आहे की शून्य परिकल्पना ही तुमच्या एखाद्या चलाचं मूल्य हे महत्वपूर्ण नाही हे सांगते, आणि दुसरी परिकल्पना जी आहे वैकल्पिक परिकल्पना चलाचं मूल्य महत्वपूर्ण आहे हे सांगते. आपण लक्षात हे नेहमी ठेवावं की आपण आपल्या संशोधनामध्ये रिसर्चमध्ये मांडत असताना आपण शून्य परिकल्पनाच मांडायची, तीच चेक करायची, त्याच परिकल्पनेचं टेस्टिंग करायचं आणि ती परिकल्पना चेक केल्यानंतर तिच्या आधारे ती शून्य परिकल्पना स्वीकारली जाते का नाकारली जाते यावरून आपल्याला वैकल्पिक परिकल्पना सिद्ध करता येते. आपण हे कधीही गल्लत करू नये की परिकल्पना ही आपण मांडतो वैकल्पिक परिकल्पना त्याच्याबद्दलच आपण बोलत राहतो, मात्र शून्य परिकल्पना मांडा, ती टेस्ट करा आणि कन्क्लुजन वैकल्पिक परिकल्पनेमध्ये मांडावे लागतात आपल्याला. आपल्या संशोधनामध्ये एक महत्वाची गोष्ट आहे. दुसरी गोष्ट आपल्या याच्यामध्ये आपण मानतो की विशेषतः मराठी थेसिस मी बघितले, मराठी आर्टिकल काही बघतो मी, त्याच्यामध्ये त्यांनी त्यांच्या ह्याच्यामध्ये गृहीतकं मांडलेली असतात ज्याला आपण अझम्पशन म्हणतो, आणि त्यांनी सर्व मान्य त्या गृहीतकाच्या भोवती केलेली असते. मात्र गृहीतकाचं परीक्षण आपण करत नाही. गृहीतक हे कुणीतरी सिद्ध केलेलं आहे. गृहीतक हे अंतर्भूत सिद्ध झालेले असतात, त्यांना तुम्हाला सिद्ध करायची गरज नसते. आपल्या संशोधनामध्ये आपण परिकल्पना मांडत असतो ज्याला आपण हायपोथेसिस म्हणतो. परिकल्पना आणि अझम्पशन्स 2 महत्वाच्या वेगवेगळ्या गोष्टी आहेत. आपल्या संशोधनामध्ये मात्र आपण गृहीतक मांडतो आणि त्याच्याबद्दल निष्कर्ष काढत असू तर ते चूक आहे. आपल्या संशोधनामध्ये आपण परिकल्पना मांडत असू तर परिकल्पनेच्या संदर्भामध्ये आपण आपली मांडणी करायला हवी, आणि ती मांडणी करत असताना त्याच परिकल्पनेचं आपण परीक्षण करायला हवं, ज्यासाठी आपल्या टी टेस्ट, झेड टेस्ट, एफ टेस्ट, चाय-स्क्वेअर टेस्ट, 1 वे 2 वे अशा वेगवेगळ्या परिकल्पना टेस्टिंगच्या पद्धती उपलब्ध आहेत. त्याचा वापर करून आपण आपल्या परिकल्पनेची मांडणी करत असतो. त्याच पद्धतीने आपण परिकल्पनेचं परीक्षण करावं. ह्या परिकल्पनेच्या परीक्षणामध्ये महत्वाच्या गोष्टी ज्या 2 आहेत त्या अशा आहेत की आपल्याला प्रत्येक परिकल्पना सिद्ध करण्यासाठी सिग्निफिकंट लेव्हल आपण महत्व पातळी म्हणतो, ही महत्व पातळी देखील आपण सिद्ध करायची असते, आणि ती महत्व पातळी जी आहे ते 0%, 5%, 1%, 10% अशा प्रकारची असते. साधारणतः 1% आणि 5% लेवल आपण परिकल्पना चेक करतो आणि त्याचे आपण कन्क्लुजन काढत असतो. दुसरी एक महत्वाची गोष्ट असते ज्याला आपण डिग्रीज ऑफ फ्रीडम म्हणतो, मुक्ती संख्या. ही मुक्ती संख्या मात्र प्रत्येक चाचणीनुसार बदलते, टेस्टनुसार बदलते. ती कधी n-1 असेल, n-2 असेल, n=n-c × n-r-1 असेल. अशा पद्धतीची परिकल्पना काम करेल, ती डिग्रीज ऑफ फ्रीडम काढली जाते. एक शेवटचा एक महत्वाचा भाग याच्यामध्ये जो आहे तो आहे आपल्या संशोधनामध्ये चूक कधी होऊ शकते याबद्दल मात्र संशोधकांनी थोडं दक्ष राहिलं पाहिजे. आणि टाईप 1 एरर आणि टाईप 2 एरर या सेकंड एरर जे असतात, तुमच्या परिकल्पनेसंदर्भात 4 शक्यता असू शकतात. मी आता सांगितलं की एक तर तुमची शून्य परिकल्पना ही बरोबर आहे आणि त्या शून्य परिकल्पना बरोबर असताना चाचणी निकष ती परिकल्पना स्वीकारत असेल तर ती चूक नसते, तो योग्य निर्णय असतो. दुसरी परिकल्पना तुमची जी असते ती चूक परिकल्पना असते आणि चाचणी निकष ती परिकल्पना नाकारित असेल तर तो देखील निर्णय करेक्ट निर्णय असतो, डिसिजन योग्य असतो. म्हणजे परिकल्पना सत्य असताना चाचणी निकष ती परिकल्पना स्वीकारत असेल तुमच्या संशोधनामध्ये परिकल्पना स्वीकारली जात असेल तर योग्य निर्णय असतो. चाचणी निकष जर तुमची परिकल्पना असत्य असेल, चाचणी निकष आपण जे टेस्ट वापरतो चाचणी निकष ती परिकल्पना नाकारीत असेल तरी देखील तो तुमचा योग्य निर्णय असतो. ते संशोधन बऱ्याच योग्य असतं. मात्र जर तुमची परिकल्पना सत्य असताना चाचणी निकष ती परिकल्पना नाकारीत असेल तर ती चूक क्रमांक किंवा दोष, त्याला एररला अनेक शब्द आहेत, चूक आहे, दोष आहे, विभ्रम आहे, अशा प्रकारचा चूक किंवा दोष प्रकार 1 उद्भवतो. आणि हा चूक प्रकार 1 हा आपल्या संशोधनाची गुणवत्ता कमी करणार असतो. चूक 1 पेक्षा चूक 2 किंवा दोष प्रकार 1 पेक्षा दोष प्रकार 2 हा अत्यंत घातक असतो. हा कधी उद्भवतो? आपली शून्य परिकल्पना असत्य असतानाही चाचणी निकष ती परिकल्पना स्वीकारत असेल तर मात्र चूक प्रकार दोष 2 उद्भवतो. म्हणजे असत्य परिकल्पना असत्य आहे आणि तरी देखील चाचणी निकष ती परिकल्पना स्वीकारतो, त्यामुळे दोष प्रकार 2 उद्भवतो. आणि हा दोष प्रकार 2 हा मात्र अत्यंत घातक असतो. उदाहरणार्थ आपण म्हणूया असं की समजा तुम्ही परिकल्पना मांडली की भारतातल्या मुलांच्या किंवा भारतातील लोकांच्या दारिद्र्यास करमणुकीच्या साधनांचा अभाव आहे, ही तुमची परिकल्पना आहे. मी मुद्दाम चूक परिकल्पना मांडली की तुम्ही परिकल्पना मांडली शून्य परिकल्पना की भारतातील लोकांच्या दारिद्र्यास करमणुकीच्या साधनांचा अभाव आहे, ही परिकल्पना मांडली आणि चाचणी निकषाने ही तुमची शून्य परिकल्पना स्वीकारली. म्हणजे ऍक्च्युअल आहे का तसं नाहीये की लोकांच्या दारिद्र्यास बेकारी हे महत्वाचं कारण आहे, पण तुम्ही चूक गृहीत धरलं की करमणुकीच्या साधनांचा अभाव आहे आणि तुमची ती परिकल्पना स्वीकारली गेली. आणि ती परिकल्पना स्वीकारल्यानंतर सरकारनं आता ठरवलं की याची अंमलबजावणी करायची. लोकांचं दारिद्र्य कमी करण्यासाठी सरकारने ह्या तुमच्या संशोधनाचा आधार घेतला आणि याच्या आधारे पॉलिसी ठरवली आणि लोकांना सरकारनं आता करमणुकीच्या साधनांचं वाटप करायचं ठरवलं तर काय होईल देशामध्ये बघा.
चुकीचं.
आणि ते जे चूक आहे ते अत्यंत चूक घातक आहे. जर समजा असं झालं असतं करमणुकीच्या साधनांचा अभाव आहे किंवा तुम्ही परिकल्पना मांडली असती की लोकांच्या दारिद्र्यास बेकारी हे महत्वाचं कारण आहे आणि ही परिकल्पना नाकारली असती तरी काही एवढा फरक पडला नसता. कारण काय होतं, सत्य परिकल्पना नाकारली जाते, चूक क्रमांक 1 होते, तेवढा फरक पडत नाही. मात्र तुमची चूक परिकल्पना जर स्वीकारली गेली आणि त्याची अंमलबजावणी जर सरकारच्या पातळीवरती झाली तर ते मात्र अत्यंत घातक असतं. आणि म्हणून जर असं आपण म्हटलं की देशातील लोकांच्या म्हणजे भारतातील बालकुपोषणामध्ये सार्वजनिक वाहतुकीचा अभाव हेच कारण आहे असं आपण मांडलं आणि तुम्ही कन्क्लुजन काढलं, फक्त एकमेव कारण आहे का बालकुपोषणामध्ये सार्वजनिक वाहतुकीचा अभाव हे कारण आहे का? नाहीये. पण ही परिकल्पना स्वीकारली, सरकारने रस्तेच बांधले देशामध्ये, रस्ते बांधले तर प्रश्न मिटले का? तुमची शून्य परिकल्पना स्वीकारली आणि त्यामुळे रस्ते बांधल्यामुळे कुपोषण कमी होणार नाही, याचा कदाचित वाढेल, कारण आदिवासी समाजामध्ये त्याच्यातून प्रश्न सुटतीलच असंही नाही. आणि म्हणून जेव्हा तुमचं अशी चुकीची परिकल्पना तुम्ही स्वीकारता आणि त्याची अंमलबजावणी जर केली तर मात्र हा दोष प्रकार 2 जास्त असतो. आणि मग संशोधकांनी हे लक्षात ठेवावं की चूक प्रकार 2 हा टाळावा. जर चूक प्रकार 2 जर आपल्या संशोधनामध्ये निर्माण झाला तर तो अत्यंत घातक असतो. संशोधनाची तुमची क्वालिटी ठरवण्यामध्ये सर्वात महत्वाचा घटक तुम्ही प्राध्यापक आहात, तुम्हाला माहिती आहे, परंतु जर परिकल्पना मांडली तर ती चेक करण्याची योग्य पद्धती वापरा. अलीकडच्या काळामध्ये अनेक साधनं उपलब्ध आहेत. एक्सेल हे साधं सोपं साधन उपलब्ध आहे, त्याचा तुम्हाला वापर करता येईल. मला वाटतं ह्याच्यामध्ये काही लेक्चर तुम्हाला होतील आता, याचे कसं वापरायचे, एसपीएसएस कसा वापरायचे लेक्चर असतात, एक्सेल कसं वापरायचे लेक्चर झाले असतील, मी तिकडे जाणार नाही. मात्र त्याचा वापर करून शक्यतो सामाजिक शास्त्रातील संशोधकांनी हे बघावं की आधी फक्त वर्णनात्मक निष्कर्ष काढण्याऐवजी त्या निष्कर्ष काढण्यासाठी या सांख्यिकी तंत्राचा वापर जर केला तर तुमच्या संशोधनाची गुणवत्ता ही अधिक वाढेल. आपल्या संशोधनाची गुणवत्ता ही आपली गुणवत्ता वाढवणार असतं आणि म्हणून संशोधकांनी हे लक्षात घ्यावं. यानुसार आपल्या संशोधनासाठी हा प्रयोग करावा, जेणेकरून आपलं संशोधन अधिक वास्तववादी होईल. विशेषतः गणित आणि संख्याशास्त्राचे आपण आभार मानले पाहिजेत. त्या साधनाच्या आधारे आपलं संशोधन अधिक वस्तुनिष्ठ करता येतं, अधिक विश्वासार्ह करता येतं. आणि विश्वासार्ह करण्यासाठी ज्या सांख्यिकीय तंत्राचा वापर केला जातो त्यामध्ये परिकल्पनेची चाचणी किंवा परिकल्पना परीक्षण हे एक महत्वाचं तंत्र आहे. ह्या एका महत्वाच्या तंत्राच्या आधारे आपल्या संशोधनाला अधिक आपल्याला व्यापक बनवता येतं, अधिक सकस बनवता येतं. या दृष्टीने आपण विचार करावा. मला आज इंटरनेटमध्ये बऱ्याच वेळेस गेलेलं आहे त्यामुळे मी पुढचं स्किप केलं, परंतु एक लक्षात घ्या की आपण या सेमिनारला उपस्थित मला आजच्या ह्या कोर्समध्ये मला आपल्याशी संवाद साधता आला, मला माझी मांडणी करता आली. तुम्ही ऐकून घेतलं त्याबद्दल मी तुमचे आभार मानतो. भविष्यात कधी आपण भेटलात तर नक्कीच आपण भेटूयात. काही चांगल्या गोष्टीचा विचारविनिमय करूया अशी मी विनंती करतो. आणि विद्यार्थ्याच्या विकासासाठी आपल्याला काही करता येईल का, त्या अनुषंगाने काही आयडिया असतील त्याचाही आपण आपल्याशी शेअर करावेत. या नंतरच्या काळामध्ये आपण त्याचा विचार करूया. थँक्यू. आपण ऐकलात त्याबद्दल सर्वांची मी अकॅडमिक स्टाफ कॉलेजच्या वतीने मी आभार मानतो. धन्यवाद.
Hello, sir.
Ah.
Sir,
Yes.
shall I propose
Yes,
the
yes.
vote of thanks? Thank you,
Yes.
sir.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
sir. Okay. Good noon, everyone. As we concluding the enlightening lecture, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to today's guest honor, Dr. Purushottam Deshmukh, for sharing their immense knowledge and expertise with us. Your expertise and insight have been truly invaluable, enriching our understanding and speaking throughout discussion on research. I appreciate all attendees for their active participation and valuable contribution. Your active engagement and enthusiastic participation have created a vibrant atmosphere and exchanged the ideas. It's my privilege to extend gratitude HRDC Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Marathwada University to all those who have contributed to making this event a success. A special word to thanks you to organizing committee and the all volunteer team and all who have worked tirelessly behind this screen. Your dedication and meticulous planning have ensured an enjoyable experience for everyone. Last but not least, sincere thank you to each and every one you are being here. As we conclude, let us carry forward the knowledge and connection gained here today, further our collective goals in research hypothesis, where we come to learn again various tests like correlation, coefficient, Z test, T test, F test. Thank you once again, and I have a great journey in this faculty program. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
madam.
you, sir.
Okay, thank you, madam. Okay. Okay. हॅलो.
हॅलो किती वाजता